Hello, everybody. My name is Stefan, and welcome to the very first episode of hopefully very many of Stefan's Kitchen. Today, I'm going to be giving you guys my basic recipe for root beer ribs. I hope you enjoy. We will first be making a dry rub, and the first ingredient that we'll be using is cayenne pepper. Now, we use this as a flavoring and not as a spice, so we don't actually put in enough to make it spicy. We just use it to flavor whatever it is that we're cooking with it. I do like spicy, but sometimes it's just nice to have flavor instead of the spice, and the heat. Next, we'll be adding some freeze-dried red onion, and we use quite a bit of freeze-dried products such as the red onion, chives, and some of the other herbs. And it's really good for flavoring easy to flavor items such as scrambled eggs. We use a lot of it in, and stir fries, chilies, that kind of thing, stews. Next is freeze-dried parsley, followed by freeze-dried basil, whatever you want to call it. Next, we'll be using some honey, and of course, for any dry rub, you're going to be using, some pepper and salt to season the rub. Our last ingredient will be a brown sugar. I'm using golden yellow, but you can also use dark as well. So now we're going to start putting our dry rub together, and first we're going to put in our brown sugar. You can use about a cup and a half, maybe 2 cups, depending on how much ribs you're going to actually be cooking. Next, we're going to be seasoning our dry rub with salt and pepper. I like to use about, for ribs, pork ribs, I like to use about a half a teaspoon to a teaspoon. So I used about a half a teaspoon there. And next, we'll be using the cracked black pepper, and I usually like to use about 2 teaspoons of cracked black pepper myself because I prefer a lot of black pepper. Next, we'll use the cayenne pepper in just a little less than a half a teaspoon, followed by about a teaspoon of basil. Next, we'll use 1 to 2 teaspoons of the dried red onion. Next, we will use 1 teaspoon of the dried parsley flakes. And now, if you want to, you can proceed to mix all the ingredients together in the bowl. And as you can see here, we're going to be using side ribs, which are much cheaper than the pork back ribs, by usually about almost half price usually. But yeah, just generously put your dry rub all over your ribs, and you can just pat it on there and press it on. You want to make sure that your meat gets all the flavor from the dry rub. Once the dry rub has been spread over your ribs, you can apply the honey directly on top of the dry rub. The honey gives a distinct flavor to the meat and kind of gives a different sweetness other than the brown sugar that's already in there. That's why I like to add it in. Grab a large roaster, and you can take your ribs and place them directly into the roaster. Now, we won't be adding the root beer right away. What we're going to do is we're going to let this dry rub cook into the meat a little bit, let the meat brown up on its own before we actually soak it into the root beer itself. Next, you can place your ribs directly into a preheated 350-degree oven. Next, you can set your timer for 30 minutes. Once the ribs have been in the oven for 30 minutes, you can take them out. And as you can see here, the brown sugar has been caramelized and the meat itself has been cooked. Now, it's not overcooked and cooked all the way through yet, but then again, you don't want that to happen because you want some of that root beer to penetrate into the meat and give it more flavor. Next, you can open up the root beer. Whoa! Try not to let it fizz up and overflow onto you. Don't want to be too messy. And just proceed to pour the entire bottle into the pan with the ribs. And yes, it will cover the ribs entirely. That's what you want anyways. Once all the root beer has been placed into the pan, proceed to put it back into the oven. Once back in, set your timer for 2 hours. And even though I actually leave it at 350 in this part of the video, I actually turn it up to about 400 to 425. Once the ribs have been cooked for 2 hours, you can take them out of the oven. Next, drain off all the root beer from the ribs. You want to do this because we're going to be roasting them in the oven next. Now, because we've slightly braised the ribs, we won't have to worry about putting water in to keep them moist or to worry about any fat from dripping down and burning into the bottom of the pan, because all the fat has been drained off with the root beer. I like to use honey garlic barbecue sauce when I'm cooking these ribs. Also, if you feel that your ribs are a little bit too moist, feel free to pat them dry before applying the barbecue sauce so that they roast a little bit better and they get the almost like a simulated barbecue flavor. Once you have coated the ribs in barbecue sauce, replace them into the oven again. Once in, make sure that your oven is between 350 to 400 and put them in for about 25 minutes. As you can see, once done, you'll have a great looking rack of ribs. I served mine with some frozen fresh corn and a few french fries. This concludes the episode. I hope you all enjoyed the recipe, and if you have any comments or wish to share anything with me, feel free to use the comment section on my page or to contact me on Facebook. Thanks for watching.